Today, I'm going to show you how Project Shield defends websites against DDoS attacks using the power of Google Cloud, and how we cut our operating costs by over 90% by adopting Apache Beam-based data processing. My name is Marc Howard, and I'm a staff software engineer at Google. I lead Project Shield, a Google product that provides free protection to news, human rights, and elections-related websites, protecting them from DDoS attacks and keeping them reliably online. To start, let's discuss the threat of DDoS attacks and the risk they pose to any website. Distributed denial of service, or DDoS, is a very common type of attack used to take websites offline. Attackers use a botnet of compromised machines and send a flood of traffic that can overwhelm a server and render it incapable of serving legitimate readers. These attacks are cheaply available for purchase, can be initiated from anywhere in the world, and do not require special access to the website or serving infrastructure. Because these attacks look like a large flood of semi-legitimate traffic, they can be hard to defend against alone. Any defenses employed by a hosting server will still need to process and make decisions about every request. The impact of these attacks on a website can be severe. If the server becomes overwhelmed, it may stop being able to serve real readers. During an attack, the attack traffic may vastly outnumber the real traffic from legitimate readers visiting the website, and those readers can be drowned out. Readers may experience extreme latency or see the site go down entirely. The attacker who is controlling the botnet of compromised machines can start and stop the attack at any time. And this attack costs virtually nothing for them to run. Attacks can last a very long time, up to weeks, and can take the service offline during critical moments when it's most important for the website to be available or to serve its information to the world. DDoS attacks are often timed to line up with important events, to suppress news articles at pivotal moments, influence elections, or otherwise deny the public access to timely information. For example, during the annexation of Crimea in 2014, when Russia effectively invaded Ukraine almost a decade ago, DDoS attacks were used to silence local media, preventing local and global citizens from staying informed as the conflict unfolded. In a region full of conflict and unrest, news struggled to get out because local news sites were repeatedly hit with DDoS attacks. Sites stayed offline for days at a time, and local citizens scrambled to stay informed while the global community remained unaware and uninformed about the details of the conflict. And a vast number of human rights violations occurred that never got world attention. In 2016, in Hong Kong, local news sites were hit with a massive set of DDoS attacks that took them offline during a series of protests. Due to the lack of media coverage, the motivation behind these protests never hit the world stage, and their effect was drastically lessened. It turns out they were advocating for a reform of the election system, but that message was effectively silenced. These two examples were direct inspirations for the growth of Project Shield, and we have seen many examples like this since. Over the last decade, DDoS attacks have continued increasing in size and frequency. As the number of connected devices grows, and as it gets easier to write compromising viruses, the size of available botnets continues to swell. Over the last decade, both the size and frequency of attacks has continued to grow substantially and shows no sign of slowing. For scale, Project Shield processes significantly more than 3 terabytes of traffic data every day, representing many billions of requests. These larger attacks require new strategies to process and defend against. Project Shield is a free service powered by Google Cloud and Jigsaw, with the goal to keep websites online in the face of these attacks, supporting elections and protecting access to other important information, like news and human rights. This is directly in support of Google's mission to keep the world's information universally accessible and is offered completely free of charge. Defending against DDoS attacks successfully means keeping the websites online. Project Shield does this by employing a defense in-depth strategy for deploying proactive and reactive mitigations to detect and mitigate attacks and minimize load on our customers' websites and origin servers. We configure Google Cloud Armor, Cloud CDN, and cloud load balancing to protect sites with a combination of caching, rate limiting, and threat detection and mitigation between readers and the website servers. Project Shield acts as a reverse proxy service. Users change their DNS settings to send traffic to an IP address provided by Project Shield and configure Project Shield with information about their hosting server. The customer retains control over both their DNS settings and their hosting server, making it easy to enable or disable Project Shield at any time with a simple DNS switch. When processing requests, Project Shield receives the request on a Google Cloud Load Balancer, where Cloud Armor and load balancing automatically block layer 3 and 4 volumetric attacks. After that, we first serve all eligible traffic from our Cloud CDN cache, which stores a copy of the website resources and speeds up the serving time for the site using the power of the global Google Edge network. Caching helps ensure the availability of the protected content if the hosting server is interrupted, because readers can still load the content from the cache. It also helps handle unexpected events, such as a news article going viral or other legitimate traffic surges to the website. Importantly, caching represents the best defense against broad, shallow attacks, in which attackers closely emulate legitimate user patterns, but with a botnet significantly larger than your average customer base. Traffic that bypasses cache is filtered through several layers of protection, powered by Cloud Armor. Project Shield uses Cloud Armor adaptive protection, which uses real-time machine learning to identify attack signatures, as well as dynamically tailored rate limits, adjusted to the needs of each individual website, to allow through legitimate usage of the website while blocking attack traffic. These rate limits are continuously tailored and active, allowing Project Shield to throttle and block most DDoS attacks within seconds. Project Shield defenses are automated with no customer defense configuration needed. Google Cloud has one of the largest networks in the world, with points of presence around the globe. This allows us to serve our readers in many regions with exceptionally low latency and to confidently stand up to the largest DDoS attacks ever seen. Google Cloud is also built on renewable technology and is committed to sustainability. With these defenses in place, Project Shield is able to help our users maintain the availability of their websites and make sure their information is accessed by their audience despite the attacks on their platform. Project Shield defenses are always on, and Project Shield and Cloud Armor work together to identify attacks and tune defenses real time for the best results. This defense has real-world impact on vulnerable websites around the globe. By keeping websites online at critical moments, Project Shield helps support the free and open flow of news, the democratic elections process, human rights activists and journalists, crisis response information, security researchers, and much more. Our platform has stood up to some of the largest DDoS attacks ever seen and has helped stabilize information during geopolitical events for over a decade. This bolsters an informed global populace and helps prevent DDoS from being an effective form of illegal censorship. For example, during the recent US midterm election season in the second half of 2022, Project Shield saw a sharp increase in the number of attacks per week against websites in the United States. During this period, a lot of the observed attacks were targeting websites that self-identified as elections monitoring and information or political candidates on their Project Shield application. Successful attacks can deny readers access to information about what races are being run, candidate choices and stances, instructions on how to vote, and updates on polling results, with the end result of influencing the election outcome. Project Shield saw attacks against these websites ramp up sharply, starting in August 2022, when the general election started being announced and organized. These attacks continued consistently through the middle of December 2022, when nearly all the election results had finished being posted and reviewed. When Ukraine was invaded, websites in the region were directing refugee traffic and other forms of crisis response, and would repeatedly go down due to attacks or excess load. Project Shield stepped in and provided protection and bolstered infrastructure to websites in Ukraine and surrounding regions. On a broader scale, independent journalists and small journalistic organizations all over the globe are often unable to hire IT specialists or robust hosting and rely on Project Shield to stay online. These journalists report on a wide array of issues, such as human rights violations, government corruption, or the latest techniques of DDoS attackers, all of which paint a target on their website. Project Shield protects organizations in over 100 countries, supporting the free flow of information and reinforcing the importance of investigative journalism. As part of delivering on this mission, Project Shield handles many types of data that pass through our system. Traffic logs from both attackers and legitimate readers enter Project Shield and are either served from cache, rate limited, or passed along to hosting servers. That same traffic is also analyzed to serve dashboards to Project Shield users. With caching and rate limiting in place, Project Shield users no longer see most requests reach their origin servers, and instead rely on our metrics and graphs to get a complete picture of their website traffic. The dynamic rate limiting that is central to Shield's always-on defenses is powered by logs analysis, in which traffic patterns are fed into tuning algorithms that improve our defenses and set sensible limits tailored to each website's specific needs. These defenses are ready before the site is attacked for immediate response and best results. However, these traffic logs come in at very uneven scale. DDoS attacks represent a big spike of unknown size, potentially many thousands of times larger than legitimate traffic, and these attacks come in with uneven frequency. In the case study of the US midterm election, the number of attacks Project Shield saw against sites in the United States peaked around election day at 4 times the resting average. But the attack and traffic rate varied significantly in the weeks before and after the election, and even throughout the second half of the year. Removing DDoS from the equation, this kind of uneven scale can be true for normal traffic for any service, such as a news article going viral or a big sales day on a retail website. These large spikes in traffic logs lead to untenable equations. Parsing logs into several types of useful results, calculated on demand, presents a huge and potentially unbounded expense. Additionally, the results can be slow to compute, requiring our system to sift through billions or trillions of logs to load a graph or recompute an effective rate limit. However, much of this computation is redundant and can be mitigated with a pre-processing approach. Project Shield started by building our own bespoke pre-processing model based on a cron job that gathered traffic logs from a given time set and reduced them to a set of reports the rest of our system could work with. This was a good step in the right direction. However, it suffered from a number of problems from the very start. First and foremost was the problem of dealing with straggler events. During traffic surges, such as DDoS attacks, which we see frequently, it's common for traffic logs to arrive late to our system. When this happens, reports that have already been generated now represent incomplete information. potentially less than 1% of the complete information. At this point, it was our system's responsibility to figure out that a recomputation is necessary and reanalyze all logs into a new report that superseded the old report. This created a recurring scenario where the highest volume windows would often need to be recomputed many times, leading to high expenses. The easiest mitigation for this was to delay the recomputation, which led to inaccurate results on our graphs at the moment when users most cared about the metrics for their platform. Worst of all, the recomputation signal was often not clear, so we would often recompute in all cases, leading to further inefficiency. Apache Beam looked like it could help solve the problems we were facing, so we began exploring how we could adapt our system. The goal was to quickly and efficiently process our uneven traffic smoothly into simple summaries that we could use for dashboards, metrics, and analysis, while dealing with stragglers in an intelligent manner that avoided the cost of full recomputation. I'm going to walk you through our journey adopting Beam and show you how and why we made some of our key decisions. You're all professionals in this space, but as part of this, I'm going to cover a few very basic concepts just to highlight how easy it was for us to adopt Beam to solve our problems. To start, we broke down the key parts of a Beam data pipeline, which has several fundamental pieces. The incoming data stream passes through an input source that feeds the stream into a Beam pipeline. There, the data is processed and then written to an output sink where the result is stored. The first step was to choose the input source and output sink that was appropriate for our use case, as well as a platform on which to run Beam. For Project Shield, our data stream is traffic logs, and the input sink we chose is Google Cloud PubSub. Our Beam pipeline is run on Google Cloud Dataflow, and our output sink is Google Cloud BigQuery. That output is then consumed by the user-facing dashboards and defense tuning algorithms. I'll walk through why we made each of these choices and the trade-offs we considered. Project Shield was already built on Google Cloud, so using Dataflow to run our pipelines was an easy first choice. Dataflow offers real-time analytics for pipeline execution, auto-scaling, and much more that I'll cover throughout the talk. Our next choice was pipeline type. There are two types of Dataflow pipelines, batch and streaming. For our use case, we chose streaming, which operates like a river of data flowing continuously downstream. This kind of pipeline helps to empower real-time analytics, which matched our use case perfectly. Next, we chose Google Cloud PubSub for our input source because it offers guaranteed delivery and high throughput, as well as clear and easy monitoring for throughput metrics like backlog size and latency. Additionally, PubSub offers the ability to split our data smoothly between multiple data pipelines by offering each pipeline its own PubSub subscription. Beam offers multiple types of input sources, and there are several that can work for a pipeline like this. After using PubSub to connect our data stream to Cloud Dataflow, we then needed to group the data in a manner that allowed us to reduce it to useful summaries. For example, a large series of traffic logs may be difficult and expensive to count when doing analyses or showing graphs. But a single summary report that simply contains the number of logs is much easier to handle. This allows us to reduce an unbounded data set to constant size. To do this, we first need to group the logs by important distinguishers. We started by designing how we should group and bundle logs together in order to produce the cleanest and most useful set of reports. After determining these distinguishing characteristics, we added them to the log events as a key using beam.map. In the case of our example, one of the important distinguishers is the host name that the log is visiting. This allows us to create a separate report for each host name, useful for showing user-facing graphs. We also needed to keep the data moving, and for that, we used windowing. Beam offers several different kinds of windows. For our system, we opted for simple fixed windows, which allow the system to gather data for a short duration and then begin processing that bundle while gathering new data for the next window. In this case, this allows us to write a report for all traffic, give it to a given host name in a given minute, which aligns very well for our need for data points on user-facing graphs. Beam offers a window into function that makes this kind of bundling and constant throughput easy. Once we had clearly defined bundles of data, we needed to process them into our reduced data set. However, these bundles of data can be very large. Beam offers us an easy way to parallelize this processing so that bundles of uneven size can be smoothly handled by a fleet of workers on a service like Google Cloud Dataflow, allowing us to operate at scale. The important function here is called combine per key, and it contains several pieces we needed to define. The first piece we needed was a method to summarize a small bundle of data into an accumulator, which stores an intermediary result. Second, we needed to define a method that allows us to merge two or more accumulators, combining their individual data into a more complete picture. Lastly, we needed a function that allows us to take the end result of these merges and convert it into the output format we were looking for. Together, these three pieces of combine per key allowed us to combine results of any size smoothly with load balancing between workers. Next, we needed to choose a solution for storing our results. Our results will typically be extracted with one result per group per window, although this may change depending on the use case. For example, when loading graphs with extended windows, multiple minutes might be combined into a single data point. We found that Beam and Google Cloud offer many output types that can be selected to fit the needs of the system. For our system, we chose to store results in Google Cloud BigQuery because it offers smooth streaming for large numbers of data rows and offers very easy combination through simple queries. We were able to use those queries to get the right set of results for our analyses and graphs with a shifting set of requirements as we continue to develop our system. One of the important strengths of BigQuery is that it allows us to combine similar results after the fact. This allows us to smoothly handle one of the biggest problems we were trying to solve with this pipeline, dealing with stragglers. If events come in after their intended group has already started processing, they may catch the next window, and their own data processing event may lead to a separate parallel result. Beam offers us a couple ways to deal with this. The simplest one is to accept the default and allow them to write their own report in the next window. Or we could change our windowing strategy and wait for an input watermark that attempts to guarantee that all data has been collected before processing begins. Beam offers several options for this as part of the Beam Transforms window library. The key insight here is to decide if you can easily combine results after the fact. In our simplified example here, we're counting the number of requests for a host name in a particular minute. These results are easily combinable through a simple call to BigQuery, allowing smooth usage of Beam's default windowing strategy. However, for more complex results, especially those that are difficult to reconstruct later, we opt to wait for the input watermark. This is especially important when handling personally identifiable information and other information that should not be saved as part of the output and which should not be stored for long periods. Traffic logs and other many types of data sources contain data that's not necessary for the output. And Beam and Dataflow allow us to securely handle that data while saving summary reports that can be stored for much longer than the traffic logs. This allows us to show graphs with extended time windows and conduct long-term analysis of website traffic patterns in order to provide the best defense. In our case, one of the easy examples of this type of data is the IP address of clients connecting to a website. Understanding the pattern of clients connecting to the site helps us sculpt the best defense, but we avoid storing the actual IP addresses. Instead, we store information such as the traffic volume of top clients connecting to the platform, irrespective of their actual address. However, this presents a challenge. Without storing the IPs, we can't add information from straggler traffic as easily. We wouldn't know if the new requests from an IP address should be added to the top IP statistics or discarded as irrelevant. So in this case, we opt to wait for the input watermark to pass our window, accepting the higher latency for this processing. This is okay, because information in this case is only used by background tasks. If we needed this information to be updated as fast as possible, we would instead opt to store a hash of the IP address or other similar information, which would allow us to partially recombine after the fact, depending on the amount of storage we used for the report. Lastly, as the data through our system grows and changes in the face of the real world, we needed our pipeline to be able to adapt. In our case, Project Shield has a resting traffic rate of well over 10,000 requests per second. And during attacks, this spikes to many millions of requests per second. There are two important axes for adapting a Beam pipeline: worker count and worker size, measured in CPU and memory. This is important for two different kinds of growth while processing data. If the number of events grows significantly, the pipeline may need additional workers in order to handle the load. This worker growth is referred to as horizontal scaling and is effective only if your pipeline is set up to handle to avoid bottlenecks. Because we used combine per key and built with this in mind, we can take full advantage of horizontal scaling. If the size of events being processed or the minimum bundle size of events grows, the pipeline may need larger workers with more CPU and more memory to be effective. This is vertical scaling. This might happen if the events grow significantly in size, such as turning on verbose mode for your traffic logs. It might also happen if the intermediate accumulation of data must be very large to preserve correctness, or if the pipeline is unable to smoothly merge results and parallelize processing. Google Cloud Dataflow offers both horizontal and vertical autoscaling, shaping your system automatically as a default part of its service. This autoscaling is great for making sure your system compensates for changes, but it should be accompanied by guardrails. Our system serves graph data to users, and it's important for these graphs to keep loading smoothly during traffic surges. To enforce that, we set a minimum worker count that prevents autoscaling from reducing the worker pool to an untenably small size, ensuring that we always have workers ready to process incoming data, even in odd traffic conditions. As you can see here, our resting worker count is usually comfortably above the minimum threshold, allowing us to take full advantage of the savings that autoscaling can offer us. In many situations, such as the first auto-scaling spike on this graph at around 3 p.m., the scaling can kick in fast enough to alleviate any serious latency increases. However, if we needed to push our serving latency lower, especially peak latency, we could raise the resting worker count higher to over-provision in some cases and ensure faster processing in others. Similarly, we put an upper worker count in place to prevent huge DDoS attacks from spiking our worker pool to undesirable levels, accepting that this comes at the cost of potential latency in extreme situations, such as you can see in this example at around 5 p.m. As we put all of these pieces together, we get a smooth pipeline that can take in traffic logs, guarantee delivery to our pipeline through PubSub, process a group of events smoothly with Cloud Dataflow, and stream the results to BigQuery, where they can be used to serve user-facing dashboards, tune Project Shield's defenses, and more. Not only is this pipeline faster and more correct than our bespoke pre-processing solution, but it's also significantly more efficient. Our new Beam-powered data pipelines saved us more than 90%, meaning they cost less than 10% the price of our old data analysis solution. Here, you can see how our traffic analysis operating expenses reduced and stabilized as we switched to a Beam-based pipeline run on Google Cloud Dataflow. Together, these services allow us to smoothly deliver on our core mission, keeping content online. With the power of Beam, we can support elections, stop illegal censorship, empower journalists and human rights organizations, and much more. We do all of this by building on the power of Apache Beam and Google Cloud, and so can you. Thank you.